Have you ever heard the name Ted Bundy? During the 1970s and 1980s, Bundy was not just a name but a terrifying obsession for America. With his brutal rapes and murders, he caused an entire nation to shudder in fear. Let's explore the horrifying story of the most frightening serial killer of the late 20th century. Ted Bundy, whose full name is Theodore Robert Bundy, was born on November 24, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. With his handsome, charming appearance, exceptional intelligence, and a promising academic path, Bundy seemed to have everything to succeed. However, behind that exterior was a cruel and barbaric person who terrified the entire United States. He used his charm and talents to conceal horrific crimes that few could have imagined. Ted Bundy was not only a serial killer but also one of the most frightening criminals in American history in the 20th century. An unhappy childhood was probably the main reason that pushed Ted Bundy into crime. Ted Bundy's mother became pregnant out of wedlock, giving birth to him as a fatherless child, becoming a disgrace to the family. Ted's grandparents hid the truth and raised him as their own son. Throughout his childhood, Ted always believed that his grandparents were his biological parents and his birth mother was his sister. Living in deceit and dark secrets, Ted's psychology gradually became distorted and unstable. The years of being deceived and abandoned in his childhood contributed to the formation of a hateful and cruel person later on. Both Ted and his mother were often hated and beaten by his grandfather, to the point that when Ted was 5 years old, the two decided to run away to Tacoma, Washington. There, Ted's mother married a cook named Johnny Bundy, and that was when Ted took the Bundy surname. However, the relationship between Ted and his stepfather was not smooth. Ted despised Johnny, seeing him as incompetent and unworthy. Life in the new family did not bring the peace Ted hoped for. Instead, the conflicts and disdain only made him more lost and bitter. The cracks in the family, combined with a painful past, created a person filled with hatred and instability. Since discovering the mother-child relationship with the person he thought was his sister, Ted tended to view life with dark and negative perspectives. Many people described Ted as a loner with a penchant for stalking women on the streets at night. In 1965, right after passing his university entrance exams, Ted Bundy uncovered the shocking secret of his family. This truth not only shattered everything he once believed, but also pushed him further down the path of crime. 3 years later, in 1968, Ted returned to the University of Washington and enrolled in the psychology program. There, he began a romantic relationship with Elizabeth Klopfer, a divorced woman who worked as a secretary at the medical school. Although this relationship seemed ordinary at first, it was filled with turbulence and instability, reflecting the complex psychology of Ted. In 1973, Ted Bundy became a law student at the University of Puget Sound. However, after just a few months, he abruptly dropped out and stopped attending classes. This decision was not only a turning point in his academic life, but also marked a significant shift in his criminal path. Ted abandoned his studies to fully immerse himself in dark schemes and actions, leading him to become one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Since January 1974, a series of mysterious disappearances began to occur, shocking the entire northwest region of the United States. The police constantly receive news about female students from universities going missing without leaving a trace. Clues about the culprit are almost nil, leaving investigators at a deadlock. Over the course of 6 months, 6 women were reported missing, disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Fear and confusion spread across university campuses and communities, as no one knew who the next victim would be. These disappearances not only shocked the public, but also marked the beginning of a horrifying crime spree perpetrated by the terrifying serial killer Ted Bundy. The situation reached its climax when 2 young women, Janice and Denise Marie Naslund, vanished in broad daylight from a crowded beach. This audacious abduction not only threw the entire community into panic, but also provided crucial leads that allowed the police to gradually crack the case. Amid the chaos and horror, the first clues about the perpetrator began to emerge. Thanks to the testimonies of witnesses present at the beach that day, the police began to sketch a profile of a charming and friendly-looking man who approached the victims under a harmless guise. The disappearance of Janice and Denise became a turning point in the investigation, marking the beginning of the hunt for one of the most cunning and dangerous serial killers in American history. Following leads from witnesses, the police gradually identified a handsome young man who introduced himself as Ted. With his charming appearance and friendly approach, he easily gained the trust of young women. Ted lured them into a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, a seemingly ordinary car that concealed horrifying secrets. The witness testimonies helped the police narrow the scope of their investigation and intensify surveillance, gradually bringing them closer to unmasking the true identity of the serial killer who was spreading terror throughout the northwestern United States. Previously, Ted Bundy had been suspected in connection with several strange incidents, but he was always excluded from suspicion due to his clean record. As an outstanding law student with a handsome appearance and no criminal history, Ted easily concealed his true nature. The combination of intelligence and an attractive appearance allowed him to create a perfect facade, making it difficult for the police to identify him as the perpetrator. These traits made Ted one of the most elusive subjects in the investigation, and it was only when the clues began to converge that his true identity started to emerge. The killer's first attack occurred with horrifying brutality. The victim was Karen Sparks, an 18-year-old student at the University of Washington. Ted Bundy broke into Karen's apartment. He used a metal rod to knock Karen unconscious, then proceeded to sexually assault her in an extremely violent and brutal manner. The brutality of the attack not only left Karen in a coma for 10 days, but also resulted in permanent injuries, turning her life into an unerasable chain of suffering. This was not just a single attack, but marked the beginning of a bloody series of crimes committed by this terrifying serial killer. The next victim of the killer was the unfortunate Linda and Healy, also a student at the University of Washington. Just 1 month after the brutal attack on Karen Sparks, Linda became his next target. Early one morning, Ted Bundy broke into Linda's house and attacked her while she was still asleep. He knocked her unconscious and took her to his car. From that moment on, no one ever saw Linda again. It wasn't until many years later that part of her skull was discovered at one of the sites where Ted Bundy often disposed of his victims' bodies. This discovery not only confirmed Bundy's cruelty, but also shed more light on the barbarity of the crimes he committed. Ted Bundy continuously expanded his targets, persistently preying on female students with increasingly sophisticated and cruel tactics. He often pretended to be disabled or injured to deceive kind-hearted victims into offering help. When these compassionate girls approached to help him load items into his car, Ted swiftly turned their trust into a deadly trap. He easily controlled his victims, sexually assaulted them, and then brutally murdered them. The final step in his plan was to dump the body in remote mountain areas where it would be difficult to detect traces of his crimes. These actions not only highlight Bundy's brutality, but also reflect a terrifyingly complex mind. The barbaric murderer did not stop at killing victims, but also committed extremely scary and brutal actions. He even returned to the remote mountainous areas where he had disposed of the bodies to have sex with the victims' corpses. These heinous acts not only reflect the pathology and cruelty of Ted Bundy, but also increase the horror surrounding the crimes he committed. These actions make Bundy's crimes not simply murder, but also a series of depraved acts, causing the whole community to face indescribable fear and obsession. Over the next 5 months, Ted Bundy abducted and murdered 5 more female college students: Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carroll Ball, and Georgianne Hawkins. In response to the series of mysterious disappearances, the police launched a wide-ranging investigation and sought assistance from various government agencies. One of the organizations involved in the investigation was the Washington State Emergency Services Office, where Ted Bundy was employed. Here, he met and began a romantic relationship with Carol Ann Boone, a single mother who had been divorced twice. This relationship unfolded while Ted Bundy continued committing his horrifying crimes. The irony of him working at the very center of the criminal investigation while being the perpetrator added an even more haunting and complex layer to Bundy's story. During the hunt for the mysterious killer, the police received numerous reports from witnesses with descriptions that closely matched Ted Bundy's appearance and his yellow Volkswagen Beetle. This consistency further increased suspicions about his involvement. Notably, Bundy's former girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, contacted the police twice to express her suspicions that Ted was the perpetrator. Klopfer persistently warned about Bundy's danger, although her warnings were initially not taken seriously. Her persistence, combined with information from witnesses, gradually brought the police closer to uncovering the identity and actions of this terrifying serial killer. When some of the victims' bodies were discovered in remote forests, Ted Bundy secretly continued his activities. At that time, he had just been accepted into law school in Utah and had moved to Salt Lake City. Despite being in a new phase of his life, Bundy did not abandon his criminal behavior. In Salt Lake, he continued his brutal actions, raping and murdering more young women. His victims included a girl who was hitchhiking and 4 teenage girls, all of whom became targets of unimaginable savagery. These subsequent attacks not only heightened fear in the community, but also marked an increase in the scale and brutality of Bundy's series of crimes. By this time, the police had begun to focus on Ted Bundy, placing him at the top of their suspect list. In August 1975, during a routine patrol, the Salt Lake City police stopped Ted Bundy's car for inspection. During the search, they discovered a mask, handcuffs, and several other suspicious items in his vehicle. These findings immediately raised suspicions about Bundy's activities. When tracking the Beetle that Bundy had sold, the police found hairs in the car that matched the hair samples of 3 missing victims. This evidence not only reinforced suspicions of Bundy's involvement in the crimes, but also marked a significant turning point in the investigation, bringing the police closer to arresting him and bringing him to justice. Ted Bundy was convicted of kidnapping and assault and was sent to prison. Despite his incarceration, the police continued their investigation to uncover the full extent of the disappearances linked to him. However, prison couldn't suppress Bundy's criminal nature. In 1977, he made 2 daring escape attempts. The first time, he exploited a security flaw to escape from the law library at the courthouse, but was quickly recaptured after a tense chase. Not long after, in December of the same year, Bundy made another escape, this time successfully escaping prison and moving to Florida. This escape not only proved his intelligence and recklessness, but also opened a new chapter in the chain of crimes that Bundy continued to commit in this state. When Ted Bundy moved to Florida, he immediately resumed his crime spree. In January 1978, he murdered 2 students and attacked 3 others at Florida State University, shaking the campus and the surrounding community. Continuing his crime spree, in February 1978, 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach went missing from her school. She became Ted Bundy's youngest victim. A few months later, in April 1978, Kimberly's body was discovered under a shed in Suwannee River State Park. This discovery not only sparked heartbreak, but also further confirmed Bundy's cruelty and inhumanity, expanding the picture of a savage and dangerous serial killer. Ted Bundy's horrifying crime spree seemed to show no signs of stopping, with his acts becoming increasingly savage and brutal. However, everything changed in February 1978 when Bundy was arrested by the police while driving a stolen car. This arrest not only marked the end of a horrifying crime spree, but also opened the opportunity for the police to continue investigating and gathering evidence related to previous disappearances and murders. This event not only brought hope to the victims and their families, but also represented a crucial first step in bringing Ted Bundy to justice. In June 1979, Ted Bundy's trial began in earnest, with the first trial taking place in Florida. While awaiting sentencing, Ted Bundy used this time to marry his girlfriend, Carolyn Boone. Not only that, but they also welcomed the birth of a daughter, creating an image of a seemingly normal family amid a case that was attracting national attention. The marriage and the arrival of their daughter not only sparked curiosity, but also added complexity to the story of a serial killer standing trial. Despite having committed a series of horrifying crimes, Ted Bundy remained a figure of public fascination, especially after his escape from prison in 1977. During the trial, Ted Bundy stood out with his handsome, charming, and calm demeanor. His intelligence and confidence only added to his appeal in the eyes of the public and the court. It was precisely this attractive appearance and charismatic personality that allowed Bundy to easily deceive and ensnare numerous young women. The contrast between his attractive appearance and his brutal nature not only heightened the haunting image of him, but also underscored the danger of a serial killer who skillfully exploited the trust and kindness of others. In 1989, Ted Bundy's life of crime officially ended when he was executed in the electric chair. This marked the conclusion of a horrific crime spree that had shaken the entire nation. Before his execution, Ted Bundy confessed to committing at least 28 murders, but investigators estimate that the actual number of victims could be in the hundreds. This figure not only reflects the brutality and scale of his crimes, but also reveals a dark picture of a serial killer who had stealthily spread terror for many years. So, we have journeyed together through the haunting and brutal path of Ted Bundy, from his first attacks to his eventual sentencing in the electric chair. Ted Bundy is not only an infamous serial killer, but also a symbol of the hidden danger that a villain can disguise beneath a charming and intelligent exterior. The story of Bundy is not just a lesson in brutality, but also a reminder of the importance of being vigilant and maintaining awareness in the face of unforeseen dangers. If you found this video helpful and want to learn more about other terrifying criminal cases, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below the video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.